CTV News at 5 with Hudson Mack.
There is a warning tonight from Victoria Police that a high-risk sex offender is living on Vancouver Island. Police want you to be aware of 44-year-old Randy Lanferman. Police say Lanferman has a history of stalking behavior and sexual assault, which involves breaking into victims' homes. Police say Lanferman was released from a federal prison today, and he is a high-risk sex offender who poses a significant risk to the safety of teenage and adult women. He is 5'10" and weighs 180 pounds with short brown hair, brown eyes, and a mustache. Lanferman has a lengthy criminal record, including previous federal sentences for break-and-enter, sexual assault, and robbery. Lanferman was released with a number of conditions, including not consuming alcohol or intoxicants. He must not attend any location where alcohol is sold, and he must not possess any knives or other weapons, nor have in his possession any ropes or duct tape or any other device that could be used to restrain a person. He must also abide by a curfew of 9 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Well, we're certainly concerned. We really want to make sure that if anybody has any information about him breaching any conditions, that we certainly hear about that.
Police say Lanferman is believed to be living in the capital area now. If you see Lanferman violating any of his conditions, police say do not approach him, but contact your nearest police department. A new report commissioned by the BC Government Employees Union shows jail guards in the province are working in deplorable and dangerous conditions. The study says BC jail guards suffer more on-the-job violence than do police officers or any other public safety workers. The report blames overcrowding at BC jails for inmate violence. A Simon Fraser University criminologist did the study, which says 90% of correctional officers have been exposed to blood and more than 75% exposed to spit and urine.
The biggest concern is that if something isn't done, we're going to see a correctional officer die on the job. It's bad enough to go to work and have a female correctional officer in Kamloops a couple of months ago had a bucket of urine dumped over her head, and another one at the North Fraser Pretrial Center had a container of feces thrown on them. They've been punched, they've been kicked, they've been spit on.
The survey found that on average there is a 60-to-1 inmate-to-guard ratio, and that figure should be 20-to-1 or no higher. The union has contacted WorkSafe BC with its concerns about working conditions. The Attorney General says the province is currently in the midst of a $185 million expansion of jail capacity. A senior communications official at the Vancouver Island Health Authority has lost his job because of the way he was hired. VIHA today terminated its contract with Stuart Muir as interim vice president of communications. It came to light today that Muir, who is married to one of Premier Christy Clark's top advisors, got the job with VIHA without that contract being put to public tender first. Muir was hired for a one-year contract for nearly $162,000. VIHA says it usually advertises its contracts to the public, but in this case, it handpicked candidates without advertising the position and awarded it to Muir. Health Minister Mike de Jong made it clear today that he fully expects all health authorities to follow the rules for awarding contracts.
They hired a friend of the Premier without an untendered contract. I mean, this seems to go right to the Premier's office, doesn't it?
What we know is that a contract was signed, but that the procedures in place that ensure there's a fair competition weren't entirely followed. So VIHA has taken what I think is the appropriate steps.
Provincial guidelines stipulate that any contract over $75,000 must be put to public tender. The NDP, which oddly did not raise the matter during question period, said outside the House that the hiring has the taint of patronage and smacks of cronyism.
They got caught. It's that simple. And I don't believe that it would have been changed if they had not been caught. But I think, to me, what's pretty clear out of this is that there's explaining that's got to be done by VIHA and the government as to why those guidelines were not followed, and that we need to, and they need to, make sure that they are being followed, and that we're not seeing, 2 weeks down the road, an ad for a communications officer for VIHA, and then lo and behold, the person who didn't get the job because the government got caught out this time is now getting the job, and they're saying, oh, well, we posted it, so it's all okay.
Joining us now by telephone from Toronto, where he is in meetings today, is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Health Authority, Howard Waldner. Mr. Waldner, thanks for being here tonight.
Hi, Hudson. Happy to be there.
Describe for us, if you can, Mr. Waldner, how did this happen?
Well, I think you're aware, Hudson, that VIHA has had a vacancy for some time. as our VP of Communications following the leave of absence from Neil Sweeney, who was with us previously. And we tried to fill this role internally with everybody just kind of taking on a bit of a load. But in September, our board determined that we needed to provide more strategic leadership in our communications function. And so we were requested to go out there and, in an expedient manner, get a hold of someone to help us fill that gap and that key role within our organisation. And it appears that we did that, but in so doing, we did not fully comply with our fair business practice. And as a result, some concerns have been raised with that. And so we are going to cancel that contract, and we're going to start again and go through the full procurement, meeting every letter of our fair business practice, and that's where we are, Hudson.
Were you aware at the time that Mr. Muir was hired of his connection through his wife to the Premier's office?
You know, Hudson, we live in a small town, and there are hardly any people working at a senior level in government that don't have some form of connection or other in this industry. We were aware of it, but I can assure you and anyone who's listening that the appointment was made with the best of intent by VIHA, and we interviewed a number of candidates, and we decided to offer the appointment to the best candidate that we saw. So that had absolutely no bearing on either way in our decision.
I understand that, Mr. Waldner, and it is a small town indeed, but surely someone in your organization would have said that the perception would be that there was some kind of pork barrel hiring going on here, because the connection, without it having gone to tender, certainly leaves open the perception that there's some favoritism going on here.
Yeah, and Hudson, with hindsight, I can see that. I can tell you, however, that we had a very open and transparent process. I personally oversaw it, as did our chair. There was no question of anybody getting any preferential treatment. But you're right. In hindsight, with the benefit of 20/20 vision, I can see where people would be concerned. And as a consequence of that, earlier today, we terminated the contract, and we will now proceed back to a full publicly tendered competition, and I regret any inconvenience or embarrassment that's been caused to anyone as a result of this. What
will the cost of getting out of this be? Can you tell us how much you're going to have to pay to get out of this contract?
Yeah, I don't have the absolute amount here, but I believe that we have the ability to terminate this contract on 10 days' notice.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Howard Waldner, we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule tonight to join us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Hudson.
Take care. Bye-bye. VIHA says a tendering process for that position will get underway in the near future. Well, overcrowding at the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital was addressed in the legislature today. The NDP opposition demanding that the Liberals put an end to adult patients using beds in the Nanaimo's children's ward. For the past year, VIHA has been using beds in the children's ward for adult patients when needed, whenever the hospital reaches capacity, which happens. Doctors on the ward say it's an ongoing problem. They're concerned that it's posing serious threats to children's health. And today, the NDP took up the fight.
Children with compromised immune systems, for example, are potentially being exposed to superbugs, C. difficile, Honourable Speaker. Physicians have been advising this government privately over the past year about the problem and have been wanting to see some sort of solution. They have become so frustrated that they have gone public last week, Honourable Speaker, saying that the situation in Nanaimo in the pediatrics ward is intolerable.
The opposition is demanding that the government commit to a timeline to see the pediatric ward return to an area that is dedicated to children only, but the government refuses, saying that the beds are only used for adults in extreme circumstances and that no children are being put at risk.
If there is any risk whatsoever detected that might adversely impact the health of a child patient in the hospital, they immediately take steps to eliminate that risk. Mr. Speaker, the professionals working there do so in a dedicated way day in, day out, and I reject any suggestion that the member may make that the health of children in the Nanaimo Hospital is being put at risk.
It was just last week, though, that an adult patient admitted to the children's ward was later found to be carrying the highly contagious C. difficile infection. That patient was immediately transferred off the ward. It does not appear that any of the children in the hospital were infected. Well, he didn't like his bag of burgers, and now a 45-year-old Saanich man may face a charge of assault as a result. Saanich police arrested a suspect Friday night in the parking lot of the McDonald's at Shelburne and Cedar Hill Crossroad. A man had gone through the drive-thru and ordered 6 hamburgers. Wasn't happy with them, though. He came into the restaurant and complained his replacement order wasn't hot enough either. He spat out a burger and threw it at the manager. The man may also be charged with causing a disturbance. Well, a van from CFB Esquimalt hit a pedestrian this morning, sending him to the hospital with serious head injuries. Police say the van was being driven by DND personnel and struck a man in a marked crosswalk on Esquimalt Road at Sturdy Street. Members of the Vic PD's traffic section and members of military police both attended the scene. The area was behind police tape for several hours as officers investigated. No word whether the weather was a factor or if there are any charges being recommended in the case. The pedestrian is recovering from head and neck injuries. There was a hazmat emergency at a Victoria hospital today. Well, not a real one. The CRD hazmat response team was on call in Victoria today, gearing up and training in case of a real chemical disaster. All day, the hazmat responders were practicing with firefighters to figure out the best way to react to hazardous spills at Royal Jubilee Hospital. Fire trucks, equipment, and multiple props were on site as workers responded to a mock hazardous spill. The hazmat crews ran through exercise drills on the second floor to prepare themselves for what might happen in the event of a real toxic gas spill.
We're doing 4 training scenarios this month, and we're doing in various facilities around the region. It's a start to finish scenario, so it goes right from the tone out at the beginning of the emergency until the entire incident is wrapped up at the end.
All hazmat members are trained as technicians first. Before they enter the hot zone, a series of steps needs to be carried out before decontaminating a spill site.
What I'm observing is that they have a response and they're going through the process of getting decon set up, getting ready to make an entry in level A suits. It's going well. They're doing their research on the chemicals of the products that they know at this point in time. They still have to go in and do into the area where this leak has occurred, try and determine if there's any other products involved, and from there determine how they're going to mitigate this problem they have.
The CRD created the hazmat team in 2006. Prior to that, a hazardous team had to be called from the Lower Mainland. 2 teenagers in Port Alberni have been arrested in connection with break-and-enters at Alberni District Secondary School. And police say one of the teens is a student at ADSS. The school was broken into Saturday and then again on Monday. By the afternoon of that day, officers had identified suspects and arrested 2 teens at a home nearby. A third suspect escaped arrest by jumping off the roof of the home and running from police. Officers are now trying to track that teen down. 17 laptops were stolen in the break-ins, worth an estimated $30,000, and the laptops, by the way, have all been recovered. The concerned citizens of Nanaimo have been cleared by RCMP after being accused of breaking election laws. Members of the group have been campaigning in favor of the mayor and council candidates who reflected their views on the city's so-called low-barrier housing strategy. A complaint was filed with RCMP, but after investigating, police say they are confident the group acted in good faith. The group had registered with the chief elections officer shortly after placing campaign advertisements. Well, the weather is still causing a bit of a problem. Rough, windy weather today caused some rough seas, and that slowed down ferry service between the island and the mainland for a second day in a row. An overnight windstorm forced BC Ferries to cancel a number of sailings this morning as a result of the rough seas. The first 2 sailings out of Port Hardy were out of Duke Point, I should say, were canceled. Along with the return trips from Tsawwassen, most vehicle traffic was rerouted to Departure Bay, but transport trucks were forced to wait it out. Some had been in the line overnight for the ferry. The first finally sailed from Duke Point at 10:15, and the wind has died down, so the ferries have been sailing smoothly ever since.